How'd you latch on to being the only guy that's crazy enough to come out here in the middle of Pennsylvania and fix this railroad?
Well, we're in New Jersey.
He was wearing a Rolex nugget gold presidential bracelet watch and ostrich skin boots.
Here's a guy with work coveralls on, Rolex watch, and I went up and he introduced himself. Hey, Rick Corman, pleased to meet you.
It was a gray Dickie jumpsuit, a single piece of clothing.
He come up, had a great big belt buckle on. I was going, man, who is this guy?
My dad was a little, you could call it a little bit eccentric, I think.
Just a unique person that you can't put your finger on it.
You know, once you become his friend, you were a friend for life.
He'd be on a very short list of the most impressive people I've ever known.
He had a childlike sense of humor. He had an infectious laugh, infectious personality.
The laughter was contagious. If he laughed, you wanted to laugh, and you did.
He had laughter that he would just explode and bend over and
He was fun to be with. He had a great sense of humor. He had something smart to say. He was not pretentious. He was just Rick.
This is Jessamine Creek, and right over here is where Ricky and I would go, and we would catch minnows, we would catch crawdads, we would fish, we learned to swim, and there was a lot of memories in Jessamine Creek.
Willie come just like us all from hard-working family. They've grown up to work.
I can remember when we did not have a bathroom in the house and we had an outhouse. It was just like a little 5-room home, very simple, a lot of love.
He'd tell you very quick, he didn't have a college education. He grew up with his father being a dirt farmer.
Rick idolized his dad, and his dad was a very hard worker. He worked for the county here, and he was just a very hard worker, and I think that instilled into Rick as far as his work ethics.
Who could ever imagine a guy growing up here in Nicholasville barely having lunch money? I mean, just barely. I mean, I remember me and my sister sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday night, and my dad would hopefully have $1.25 each for us. But if he did, it would be just barely. And I remember more than once where he didn't have money for himself to eat on that week. So I come from a very humble beginning.
And he learned early on that there's not a lot of money in farming. So he would help my uncle on the railroad.
It all started, he was working for his uncle, digging septic tank holes with a backhoe. And his Uncle Clay got a contract to rehabilitate a rural railroad crossing. And the superintendent of that job told Rick that he wanted him to use his backhoe to unload railroad ties from a gondola car.
Men used to climb down in rail cars and lift heavy ties, creosote ties, and they would manually have to lift them and throw them out of the car.
Very dangerous work, pinched fingers and hands, strained backs. You have to pick up from the bottom of a gondola, lift it up over the side and toss it over the side.
He learned how to unload those ties with his backhoe, If you look in the depot today, there are pictures of a young man with a backhoe moving it across a flat car, and that was how he got it onto the gondola car.
When I saw him put a backhoe up on top of a gondola to unload cross ties, I thought that was the scariest thing I had ever seen, and I couldn't believe that he did it.
He could walk that backhoe right up in a coal car or sand car, and nobody else could do it. He had to teach him how to do it.
He went to a work site and met the Conrail superintendent and asked if he could show him how he could unload railroad ties from gondola cars using his backhoe. After he showed him, he said, "I've got 58 cars here. When you finish unloading those, come see me and I'll tell you where to go next, different town." And that's how R.J. Corman Railroad Construction was born.
Leave it here. Leave it here. Well, I was going to tell you that backhoe there is what I started in business with.
That's it, huh?
That's it. That's my original machine. I got a lot of new ones, but I like that one. When I come on these jobs, I bring it with me. It's like my pet. Take care of it, rub it a little bit, bring in a soft drink every day. Takes care of me too.
Early on, or initially when our firm started doing work for Rick, it was paying the day-to-day bills and routine expenses of the business was a struggle. It really was. And there was times where there was a need to, borrow money and it was difficult. It was a struggle to do that.
But he would tell me, "Sand, hang in there, because we are going to make it."
He said, "Luther," he said, "I've been to several banks. They've all said no." And he said, "You're my only hope."
Luther, I think Dad would tell anyone and everyone, gave Dad the opportunity to be successful. It was back in the 80s, interest rates were outrageous. Dad went to Luther as a final, please, just begging almost, saying, "Please give me a chance. You have to come see what I can do."
It wasn't a bad company. He just, he was in a cash flow crunch. He was out there growing the company, and he needed money and capital to do that with. So I was sitting in my office one day, and I got a call. He said, "Luther," he said, "I've got a train wreck in Campbellsburg, Kentucky. I'd like for you to go with me. I'd like to show you what I do."
Well, the cars were just crossways in that tunnel. Rick said, "Come on, Luther," said, "we're going to go in here and look at these cars."
And he was in there hooking cable to those cars, and he was pulling the cars out. I think at the time there were 65 cars in that tunnel, that train wreck. We left there about 2:30 in the morning, and he cleared the line for the trains to get by.
And I could see Luther to this day, and Rick crawling over those coal cars and became just black with coal, and when they came out the other side, there was Luther, and he looked down at his shoes and looked at his clothes, and Rick just laughed. That was so funny to him to get Luther dirty. Being a banker, that just was right up Rick's alley.
And that was my first introduction to Rick Corman. And the more we talked and the more I listened, the vision and the knowledge and the determination that man had, I knew he wasn't going to fail.
Luther put his neck out on the line and said, "You've got to trust me," to his bank, to his bosses at the time. "This guy's the real deal. He's going to make it."
It wasn't easy. The first year we did business, Rick could not do his payroll. I covered his payroll every week for almost over a year. So I called Rick up. I said, "Rick," I said, "they called me in today and said I was going to get fired if I kept paying your overdrafts." He said, he cackled, "Ha, ha, ha, ha. Don't worry. I'll put you on the rail gang. You'll have a job."
One of the things that I'm most proud of was being able to give Rick Corman his first derailment job in the winter of 1977. And with the job that he did, it started him off to doing full-time derailment work for the railroads, not only CSX, but the other Class 1s as well.
The first time I met Rick Corman was in the summer of 1982. I was division manager for CSX in Akron, Ohio, and we had a Saturday morning golf outing. And we were just coming in when this helicopter come flop, 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 and we could see it was going to land at the edge of the golf course, and it did. We hadn't talked for more than a couple sentences when he said, in his typical way, "I'd sure like to do some work for you, sir."
So when Rick got started in 1973, railroads were doing everything by themselves. If there was a derailment, railroads would clean up their own derailment. If there was a need to build additional track, the railroads would build their own additional track. Rick brought in a new level of thinking because of his cost structure and his dedication to extreme high quality. He was able to do it for the railroads cheaper.
And so we talked about derailment work and some construction work and so on. And we did, in fact, start using him there.
And so his company grew and grew and grew as more railroads started to move away from doing everything themselves.
And most people don't realize that his company was one of two in the nation that did this kind of work, repairing wrecks of trains. And so all of the railroads dealt with him every day. And every one of them swore by him.
10% of the car is actually still resting upon the bridge. So it's 10% beyond halfway sitting on the bridge. And I think one of the problems with what I have, whenever we get it loose, is we're going to have to probably kick it in the river. It's not going to want to fall on its own.
And starting that derailment company, he was very supportive of the fact that it was almost as if it was a tortoise and the hare. We were so far behind a major competitor, but that in order for us to grow the company profitably, to earn the respect of our clients, we had to do it honestly from the very first time. We had to differentiate ourselves through the quality of our service, through the integrity of our service.
I started with R.J. Corman in 1985, June of 85. I first met Rick Corman, I guess I was working for another railroad, TTI. We was laying rail. Rick flew in his helicopter and everybody was watching him, and all of a sudden he come up and introduced himself to me, and he kind of asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm the one that kind of lays the rail out and puts the joint bars together. And he said, this is what I want to get into. I want to start laying rail. And I said, man, it's hard work. And he said, how many pieces you get a day? I said, well, right now on a good day we may get 20 put in. And he said, he throwed his head back like that and laughed, that big laugh he had. He said, I'll tell you, we're going to lay a whole lot more rail than that.
We didn't have a lot of assets. We didn't have a great deal of equipment. It was a lot of handwork, a lot of driving spikes, and rebuilding railroad track.
I went to work for him and we never looked back. It was 100 pieces and then went on. And we got up to 2 miles a day. It was unreal. And today we're still laying rail.
Give us some numbers.
Like what type of numbers, Dave?
How far are these guys going to go today? How many guys you got on and how many
We
machines?
got about 38 guys on the gang. We're going to go about 2 miles today if the heat don't get us, but I suspect it will. We get an early start today. Yesterday we got a late start. Started at 9 o'clock. You get started at 9 o'clock, there ain't much left to do. Hopefully by 9 o'clock this morning we'll have 2 or 3 of them filleted, we call it. And we can get a decent jump on the thing where we can get a half dozen of them to lunch. Half dozen of them means ribbon rails. We do approximately 8 of them a day if we can hold up. They're 1,440 feet long, so 8 of them's a little over 2 miles. So when I say a half dozen, we like to get a half dozen by lunchtime if we can. Generally get 1 an hour. And we'd probably be able to handle that this morning.
Following the bankruptcy of the Penn Central, one of the things that the Congress recognized is that the Class I railroads were very poorly suited to make the final runs from their cross-country hauls to actually serve their customers. And they provided a legislation by which the Class I's could spin off these short lines at the end.
He was known initially for the re-railing services, but then branched out and did construction services and actually ran railroads and really took advantage of the Staggers Act, which occurred in 1980.
And so he amassed a great deal of wealth, frankly, because of his association with the railroads. When they decided to start closing down lines that connected to their main trunk, he bought them and became the largest independent railroad operator in the nation.
The Class 1s were happy to have an operator like Rick be their short line partner, and Rick was happy to partner with him.
Rick was a very practical guy, very common sense kind of fellow, and he didn't let too much stand in his way of doing what he needed to get done. He would just press forward.
He loved the people in the railroad industry, and it was his mission to serve them, provide the very best service he possibly could through his companies to that industry. And he did it very successfully. Full circle, from hardly being able to borrow enough money to operate on to actually owning the building that the bank operates out of. That's pretty much full circle.
We have basically 4 divisions, 4 separate companies actually, not really divisions, R.J. Corman companies. The first one would be the R.J. Corman Railroad Construction. That makes up the biggest part of our business. Clean up train wrecks in that division, build railroads, take up railroads, buy railroads, and abandon them. That being the main entity. Secondly, I would say would be the short line operations. Consist of, at the present time, 2, the Memphis line and the Bardstown line. We have about 100 miles of railroad now, fixing to acquire about another 100 miles. And that'll be a line in Ohio. The 4th business that we have is the dinner train business, which is located directly behind me. And it's the only one that's losing money. So, but it's not losing the I've told everybody that. I just couldn't resist telling y'all.
From the construction business grew the derailment business. From the 2 of them grew the short line business. From the short line business and the construction business grew material sales. And it was his vision that birthed the storm team.
He was always extremely responsive to that call of what your needs were, and Rick's response in the red truck approach was eventually immediate.
As a transportation officer for CSX, I drove to one of the largest derailments in American history in Pennsylvania. And as I was driving to the derailment site, there was a long, long line of red trucks all pulled off to the side, their equipment unloaded, and they were already working. And it brought me great comfort.
The derailments that I went to where RJ responded, the enormous number of trucks, the red trucks that showed up, gave you a sense of confidence.
What does R.J. Corman bring to the table that other people in this business don't?
It's like the cavalry coming in on our side for us. I've been here 5 or 6 days ahead of y'all arriving, and we're kind of just getting the place secure. But as far as getting the rail operation back and hot meals, hot showers, equipment, y'all were a blessing to see coming in. It's almost like the cavalry coming in for us. So you were a very welcome sight when we saw that convoy coming.
The Katrina project, he called me and he says, look, where are you at? And I said, well, I'm in Chicago on a job. And he says, I want your butt in Louisiana tomorrow afternoon. We got work to do. Went down and met him and took me on a helicopter over the project. There was nothing but bodies of water. Bridges was nothing but piling. He looked at me and he says, can we do it? And I looked at him and I said, man, what are you trying to do, lose the company? I said, man, what? It scares me, you know. And he goes, we can do it.
I saw times when Rick, I thought that he had bit off more than he could chew with Hurricane Katrina. But in talking to him, it was more than bravado. He never did think that he had bitten off more than he could chew.
After we got everything in order, we ended up building 7 bridges. The construction company, mostly with derailment and all the companies helping. We built 40 miles of track and we got the job done.
It was a big relief, and I know it was a big relief for Mr. Corman because, you know, he just loved it. We all loved it, and everybody was jubilant all down the line.
Yeah, he had a big heart, a big heart. He was always there, you know, anxious to be helpful in any way that he could.
He helped people beyond anything that I've ever seen. He was philanthropic to the nth degree, most of it anonymously.
I would answer the phone and, you know, good morning, R.J. Corman. Hey, Wanda, this is Rick. Did you know so-and-so's house burned down? Now, I'm talking about an employee. And I'd say, no. And he'd say, well, he's got 3 kids, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to get a double-wide 3-bedroom house trailer out there today and get it set up and ready for them.
And I've seen people come to him, my son or my father or my mother has cancer, can you help us? And Rick was always, regardless of who it was, where they were from, Rick would always find a way to try to help them. Always try to find a way to help. And he had a heart that's absolutely bigger than the world as far as I was concerned.
11 years ago, when my little granddaughter was born, which is the only grandchild I have, well, every week, he got his haircut every week, not once a month, but every week. And he would bring me a $20 bill and a $2 bill. And what the $2 bill was for, I have no idea. And so then in 2010, January of 2010, every week it was a $50 bill and a $2 bill. And all this was to go for her education, her college education. And so then every week it was a $100 bill and a $2 bill. And that's exactly where it's going, for her education.
He and I like to eat at the same kind of places. Waffle House. Mostly we'd sit on the counter so we could talk to the people. But more importantly, we'd sit in there, have something to eat. He always left tips to everybody, always carried a bag of $100 bills and taught me, you leave $100, you have enough money.
Rick was a giver in many ways. He liked people. He wanted to take care of people.
He made you feel special. He would always make sure that he remembered your name. He would walk up and shake your hand, and he always made sure that he made eye contact and asked about you.
That was just his personality. He was very genuine. When he asked about your mom, your dad, your brother, your son, he really wanted to know how they were and how they were doing.
He taught us to always treat people the way you want to be treated. And everybody says that, but I don't know how many times people practice that ideology just 100% of the time.
And the great thing about Rick is he brought everybody along with him. You know, the people around him, they became successful. And then the people around them, they became successful. So that attitude just permeated that whole company, and you could see it. And because of that, he got 110% out of everybody who worked for him.
He was a guy that, man, that just put his arm around you and hug you and say, man, we got to go. And that's the way he was, and he was just a big motivator.
He had this incredible ability to make you feel better about yourself and what you could achieve.
And he didn't try to play the Warren Buffetts of the world, but he would sure come down and lift the people up that need to be lifted up.
Rick in the early years he was a visionary and a cowboy, and he had that cockiness, and he walked with his cowboy boots and early on with his cowboy hat. But he had a heart for people. He could see someone's potential, and he had a way in prodding and compelling and drawing them up for them to reach their highest potential.
What is your role at R.J. Corman?
I'm the biggest cheerleader, and that's all. I'm the biggest cheerleader.
You have to look good to be good was
literally his number one philosophy, other than taking care of his employees and making sure that his employees were treated well. That was his number one goal. If you care enough to take care of your equipment and make sure that it looks great, you're going to care enough to make sure the job gets done well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard him say that a number of times. He said, to be good, you got to look good. You know, and everything he's ever touched was just, I mean, it was perfect. Those barns out there, just everything was just perfect.
We've practiced it today. It's part of the culture of this business. If you see a muddy red truck, it's only because it just left the site and hasn't been to the wash yet.
Rick was sitting there talking to me, and then just out of the blue, he looks over at this mower I have sitting over to this, along this fence row there, and he says, "You always let your equipment sit out in the rain rust like that?" And as soon as he said that, it just struck me. I said, I love this guy because that's been bothering me for the last 2 weeks, right? And he picked up on it instantly.
Red, clean, neat. I never saw a R.J. Corman truck with a speck of dirt on it. Never.
The only time he'd get on people, if the truck was dirty, if the coat was dirty, or if they wasn't doing the right thing, then I'm just telling you, he wasn't too pleasant with them.
These guys say you spit and holler a lot.
Well, I don't think so. I think that they probably exaggerate about that.
Rick did expect a lot, and he knew what you could do. He knew what a person could do. And if that person didn't do what he thought he could do, that would disappoint him.
Been here 24 years, and we've had hard times, and Rick was a demanding person, but Rick was like a dad to me. He was.
He cares about people, but you've got to work. We're not just giving away stuff. Everybody's got to pull their weight.
Well, one of the first jobs, rail jobs I'd been on, or went on with Rick, I remember we was working way up into the night. Started really early. I was doing correction behind all the gang. I had been working there for probably 12 hours, 14 hours. See some flashlights coming up the track. I'm thinking they're coming to take me back to the motel. Rick comes up to me, says, "You're doing a great job." He said, he hands me the flashlight and says, "This will probably help you." And then he walks on up the track.
He could be very tough. He would be one of the toughest bosses you would ever have, but people wanted to please him, and they wanted him to be proud of them.
You didn't do things well, and he'd kick you in the fanny. He'd be about 5 seconds later, and you may have heard this, that he'd put his arm around you and have that chuckle, that deep chuckle, and he called it, "It's tough love, Noel. It's tough love, babe, and let's go."
I think he very rarely left you thinking I failed. He managed to let you know, hey, you need to improve here, but your life's not a failure. You've done great things, and he trusted you. And I think having his trust is important to people, and he made people feel like, hey, he may be mad at me about this, but he trusts me to fix it.
We were working on a job in Illinois. It was another track job, another month or so of long days. We had an employee, it was an older employee, he had a birthday. You can hear Rick come with this sheet cake, a birthday cake, and he gathers everybody around, and it was truly an unforgettable experience from a guy that counted every minute that you'd have 30 guys standing around cutting a birthday cake in the middle of a job.
He was very loyal to his employees. He did not ask them to do something that he would not or did not do. He was a leader, and they followed. But they followed because he was so true to them. And he exercised leadership in a way that they understood to be that he was their friend.
One thing about Rick, he was right there with you all the time. I mean, all them 10 years that we laid rail together, he was there to start the job to the end of the job.
And he never asked you to do anything he wouldn't do or couldn't do. I've drove spikes right beside him for hours at a time. And it is a tough job. but he never was afraid to roll up his sleeves and show you that he was able to do it just like you did.
And I asked him one day, how many different pieces of equipment are there in this yard? And he told me 175 different pieces of equipment. And he looked at me and said, I can operate every one of them. And I believe that with all my heart.
What endeared him as far as loyalty and respect with the early employees was he'd get out there and he'd do every job he expected somebody else to do.
517 crossing over.
How's your day going?
It's going real good. Extremely well. Real happy. That rain's cooled all of our machines off. Not too worried about the guys. They know when to quit. Heat's hard on equipment. Real hard.
Hard on the guys, too.
They seem to be holding up better than the machines. They normally do. They got the built-in thermometers. Well, we had 2 guys lay down up there a while ago, though.
You know, you kind of got these guys in addition to being a boss, you got a lot of their respect. How'd you get that?
Well, get out there and work with them. You won't get any more than you demand. They're good guys, they're all good guys.
It was like he treated all of his employees basically like family.
Rick knew if he hired good people and he treated them right, they'd be there with him forever. And that's exactly what's happened.
You're a team member here. I got you. I'm gonna feed you, I'm gonna pay you, I'm gonna take care of you. If anything happens to, I got you. Care about each other. That's how he was.
So the loyalty that was between he and his employees was remarkable.
Health was always very important to Ricky, and so he provided a place for my family, the employees, to where we would have an area to be able to go run, bike, up by the sunflowers, by the train cars, by the Jessamine Creek. A beautiful private area that we didn't have to worry about anyone coming by or running over us, so that was something very important to him years ago.
And we always ran as kids. My dad had us run Michon in April 3 miles a day for many years.
I took up running because of him, where he was a real avid runner. I always thought, I can't run. I'm not a runner, I can't run, and thought, we're running.
When I came to work out here, we talked about doing races for the employees and for people in the community that might want to hold a race out here. We were out here getting ready to run a race, and he asked me to go pull a cord, and there was my name up there on the pavilion, which was something real special. And I'm sure that just came about because of all those years of he and I running together. Every day we would be running, he says, Coach, every day's a Saturday. We're so blessed. Look at all this beautiful land we have to run on. Such a special place.
One of his favorite things to do, honestly, was sit on the front porch or sit in his living room and just look out at the property. He just thought it was so beautiful, and that's where he was the happiest, just sitting, relaxing, and being able to take in the beautiful scenery of Jessamine County.
Rick was diagnosed with IgA kappa multiple myeloma in 2001. What that is a blood cancer. It's the second most common blood cancer after non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
He called me one day and he said, well, this is for the Derby. He just found out about it. He said, I got multiple myeloma cancer. And that weekend we had to take the people to the Derby.
I was there with him, and we'd already gotten to the Derby, and he kind of came over to me, and he just had a blank look on his face, and he told me, and it was horrible. And, you know, he told me at that time, he said, it's not good. I have less than 6 months.
And he come tapped me on the shoulder and said, come on, let's go. And we went all the way down at the end of the track where nobody was at. And he started crying. And I started crying.
His prognosis, according to the group in Mayo and according to the group in Arkansas, without effective therapy would be about 6 months. If his treatment worked, it would probably keep him alive and cancer controlled for at best a few years.
Well, he came to me early before he announced it to the whole company, and he told me about the disease and
told me how serious it was, and that he was going to investigate, all the approaches there was to fight the disease, and it was his intent to win that battle.
And I'll never forget the first day we met. We were talking about how this journey might unfold, and we both agreed that 6 months was ridiculous. No one was going to put up with that, and we were going to just go for this and take every year as it came and go from there.
I found out about his illness, and I asked him about it. He said, "Well, it's fatal, but it's treatable," he said. And so he lived with that Damocles sword hanging over his head for the last few years of his life, but he never let it interrupt his sense of humor or his relationships with people or his business work. He just went right on.
Extraordinary, courageous, undefeated individual who continued to do great things for his company and for his community as he fought off this dread disease.
After Rick's first bone marrow transplant, he knew in advance that he was going to be unable to use commercial air transportation, and he was. So he bought some private aircraft, and he also built his own runway.
Then he decided to tell me and Jay and Shauna that we had to help him build this runway. I was probably 10 or 12 at the time, and so we were all out there hauling rock or doing whatever we had to do to help build this runway.
He had opportunities, and he and I talked about it many times, to sell the company. He never even considered it. And I said, "Rick, you have cancer, you got a limited time," and I used to tell him, we're all going to die, so let's make that real. Between you, we're both dying at some point. But why wouldn't you just sell and do what you want to do? He said, "Because I've got employees."
Rick prepared this company to go on after he passed away because he cared and loved his people, and he wanted to make sure they were taken care of. He never did want this company to ever sell.
I'm really, really proud of this company. I gotta be the luckiest guy that I know. And I really have something that I say that I want to make sure that I get it on tape, because I really believe it. I don't believe this company will ever go any further than where the people take it. I just happen to be the main cheerleader, and I really feel fortunate to be in that position. And it's really the people that make this company so different. It's not me, it's the people. And I do believe that, I genuinely believe it.
Never gave up, never believed that his time on this earth had come to an end, was always hopeful for the future. And that's inspired a number of different people, from his doctors to his family to myself.
Very seldom any sadness with Rick, and even through his cancer, it was always, "Coach, we're going to do this."
A lot of times I was there with him, and I saw what the medication was taking the toll on his body. Not one time in the 12 years did I hear him complain.
He ran the marathon after his transplants. I mean, no one else has done that. He did, another first. And I would join him for half the marathon. My wife Annie would not let me do the whole marathon because she'd worry that I wouldn't make it. Of course he did.
He didn't slow down in any way, shape, or form. He ran the marathon. He rode bicycles across Iowa. You dip the rear wheel of the bike in the Mississippi River, and then you ride across Iowa and dip the front wheel in the river that's the western boundary. He did that 2 or 3 times after he was diagnosed.
It's been amazing what he did with that disease when he was diagnosed. I think they gave him a year or two, and 10 or 12 years later, he was still going. So he was a single-minded fighter.
Typical of Rick, he fought his disease tooth and claw, and before he died in 2013, he had lived and fought his cancer for 12 years. So this was an amazing testimony to him, and also to the treatments, thank goodness, that we were able to bring to bear to beat those odds. But all the way along the line, he did it with this incredible spirit and positivity that was just everything that Rick was about.
Rick went full steam
Until the day he died.
Well, like I say, I gave Ricky his first haircut when he was probably a year old, something like that. I'm not real sure exactly how old he was. And then I gave him his last one. You know.
And the only thing he asked me to do, and this is probably 90 days before he passed away, that's whatever I can do, I'll do. He said, I want you to take care of my children. He said, steer them in the right way. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure that happens.
Rick was a realist. If you look back historically, American railroading has only existed for slightly more than 200 years. But he thought it would be fun to see just how long it could go, and he thought 200 years was a nice goal.
He realized that there was a need for him to make sure that the businesses that he had spent his entire life creating and building would continue.
My dad, he always was thinking and he was always planning, and he knew one day he would no longer be at the company. So he made sure that he set up everything that he could so that the company could succeed. One of the things he did was, of course, put people in place that he knew would be here to help the company succeed. He hand-selected our current president and CEO, Craig King.
We spent a lot of time talking about growing the company, and my number one direction was to grow the company and to do it in a way that protected his integrity and his ethics and foundational principles of the company. And we've certainly done all that.
The values and the vision that Rick Corman instituted at R.J. Corman, it's really the platform of where that company is today. I think it will be carried on for generations.
Railroads will always continue to contract services. R.J. Corman will always be there and will always be the preeminent provider.
There's a lot of people that never got to know him, and that's a shame, because if you ever met him, you would never forget him.
This was a remarkable human being. We would not see the like of him again.
I don't know in my lifetime if I'll ever be around another man like Rick Corman. He's the most unique individual that I've ever been around.
I certainly miss him more than anything, but I can always remember him being my greatest friend.
He was truly special.
It was just two friends talking, and I really enjoyed talking to him. I miss him.
Miss the guy. Sorry he got choked up, but do miss him.
And like everyone else you've talked to, I missed him. And I'll tell you very frankly, I loved him.
Most importantly, he cared about his family, and most importantly to me, he was the best dad that you could ever ask for. He was just the best, and I miss him every day. He was always there. He was a shoulder to cry on. He was there to give me advice. Growing up with him was, like a dream. I mean, obviously he had to be a dad sometimes, and he had to discipline us, but for the most part, I mean, he just loved us, and that was all we could ask for. And he was the greatest dad ever.
He taught me about pride. He taught me about you can do anything you want to do if you do it right. Don't ever lie to people. Treat your people with respect. Make sure you pay them good. Have compassion. Always have compassion. And he said, be humble. He said, regardless how far you go, how much money you make, be humble. Don't let it get to you.
I always think of him actually in the present tense, because I sense the force of his being is so evident and still, in my view, here, and it lives on in his wonderful family, his lovely children and grandchildren, and it also lives on, most importantly, in his company and everything it stands for.
I come from a very humble beginning, and to take that and make, you might as well say $100 million this year. Yeah, it's not Microsoft, but it's pretty daggone good.